Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is WireDogSec, back with another video for you guys. Today's video, we are continuing on inside of TryHackMe. This is Advent of Cyber 2024, and we are on task 15, day number 9, talking about GRC stuff here. It says 9 o'clock, make GRC fun, tell no one. Hopefully you all have an awesome day today. You're ready to learn something. Now, let's go ahead and dive into it. The story. McSkitty and Glitch want to hire an e-discovery company to process some forensic data for their investigation. They have invited bids from third parties for this purpose. 3 companies have bid for the project. McSkitty and Glitch now need to do a risk assessment on all 3 of these companies to identify the one with the least amount of risk so that they can move forward. All 3 companies were required to fill out a questionnaire based on which risk assessments will be done. All right, so we're going to talk about GRC stuff. Introduction to GRC. And it says here, governance, risk, and compliance, aka GRC for short, plays a crucial role in any organization to ensure that their security practices align with their personal, regulatory, and legal obligations. Although in general, good security practices help protect a business from suffering a breach. Depending on the sector in which an organization operates, there may be external security regulations that it needs to adhere to. Let's take a look at some examples in the financial sector. Reserve bank regulations. In most countries, banks have to adhere to the security regulations set forth by the country's reserve bank. This ensures that each bank adheres to a minimum security level to protect the funds and information of their customers. SWIFT CSP. Banks use the SWIFT network to communicate with each other and send funds. After a massive bank breach resulted in a $81 million fraudulent SWIFT transfer, SWIFT created the Customer Security Program, CSP, which sets the standard of security for banks to connect to the SWIFT network. Data protection. As banks hold sensitive information about their customers, they have to adhere to the security standards created by their data regulator, usually the Reserve Bank in most countries. When you run a large organization with multiple different teams, how do you stay on top of all the regulations and ensure that good security is applied to all teams? This is where GRC comes in. They play a crucial role in understanding external security standards, translating them into internal standards, and then ensuring that they are applied by all teams to help reduce the organization's risk to an acceptable level. Let's take a quick look at the 3 functions of GRC. Governance. Governance is the function that creates the framework that an organization uses to make decisions regarding information security. Governance is the creation of an organization's security strategy, policies, standards, and practices in alignment with the organization's overall goal. Governance also defines the roles and responsibilities that everyone in the organization has to play to help ensure these security standards are met. Risk. Risk is the function that helps to identify, assess, quantify, and mitigates risk to the organization's IT assets. Risk helps the organization understand potential threats and vulnerabilities and the impact that they could have if a threat actor were to execute or exploit them. By simply turning on a computer, and an organization has some level of risk of a cyber attack. The risk function is important to help reduce the overall risk to an acceptable level and develop contingency plans to the event or in the event of a cyber attack where a risk is realized. Compliance. Compliance is the function that ensures that the organization adheres to all external legal, regulatory, and industry standards. For example, adhering to the GDPR law or aligning the organization's security to an industry standard such as NIST or ISO 27001. And let's see here. Introduction to risk assessments. Before McSkitty and Glitch choose an e-discovery company to handle their forensic data, they need to figure out which one is the safest choice. This is where a risk assessment comes in. It's a process to identify potential problems before they happen. Think of it as checking the weather before you go on a hike. There's a storm coming. You'd want to know ahead of time so that you can either prepare or change your plans. Why are risk assessments done? Risk assessments are like a reality check for businesses. They connect cybersecurity to the bigger picture, which minimizes business risk. In other words, it's not just about securing data, but about protecting the business as a whole. Imagine you run an online store that collects customer information like names, addresses, and credit card details. If that data gets stolen because of a weak security system, it's not just the data that's at risk. Your reputation, customer trust, and even your profits are on the line. A risk assessment could have helped you identify that weak point and fix it before anything went wrong. For McSkitty and Glitch, assessing the risk of each e-discovery company helps them decide which one is less likely to have a data breach or other issues that could disrupt the investigation. And it says performing a risk assessment. Every business's main goal is to generate revenues and profits. For most businesses, cybersecurity does not directly contribute to the revenue generation of profit maximization. Businesses decide to spend part of their hard-earned revenue on cybersecurity to avoid the risk of revenue or reputation loss resulting from a cyber threat. Businesses often take these steps to achieve this goal. We will now work through the process of completing a risk register. A risk register tracks the progress of risk mitigation in all open risk. An example of such a risk register is shown in the animation below. Let's take a look at the steps required to add risk to the register. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Be sure to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. Once you subscribe, be sure to hit that notification bell. All right, so you know every time I post a new video. As you can see here, most people that view my videos, view my channel, are not subscribed. Now, if you do subscribe, it will help me get into the YouTube algorithm so that we can continue to grow our glorious community here. As always, thank you all for taking the time to watch. Have a nice day and enjoy the video. This is probably one of the, I guess, more basic ones out there, right? Creating an Excel spreadsheet that has your risk and stuff inside of it like that. I've seen this before. And also seen other GRC platforms like Archer and stuff like that. But let's go ahead and continue on. Identification of risk. To assess risk, we must first identify the factors that can cause revenue or reputation loss resulting from cyber threats. This exercise requires carefully assessing the attack surface of the organization and identifying areas which might be used to harm the organization. Examples of identified risk can be an unpatched web server, a high-privileged user account without proper security controls, a third-party vendor who might be infected by a malware connected to the organization's network, a system for which support has ended by the vendor and is still in production. An organization might identify several other risks in addition to these examples. However, in addition to just identifying risks, these risks also need to be quantified. After all, the likelihood of materializing a risk on a cordon off and isolated server differs greatly from that of a public-facing server hosting a web front end. Similarly, the impact of a risk materializing on a crown jewel such as a main database server containing confidential information differs greatly from that of a development server with dummy data. Assigning likelihood to each risk. To quantify risk, we need to identify how likely or probable it is that the risk will materialize. We can assign a number to quantify this likelihood. This number is often on a scale of 1 to 5. The exact scale differs from organization to organization and from framework to framework. Likelihood can also be called probability of materialization of a risk. An example scale for likelihood can be 1, improbable, so unlikely that it might never happen. Remote, very unlikely to happen, but still there's a possibility. Occasional, likely to happen once, sometime. Probable, likely to happen several times. Frequent, likely to happen often and regularly. And this is what we're talking about here. They have a drop down for this area here. It might be noticed that while we are trying to quantify the risk, we still don't define exact quantities of what constitutes several times and what constitutes regularly, etc. The reason is that likelihood for a server, which has very high uptime requirements, will be different from a server that is used infrequently. Therefore, the likelihood scale will differ from the case to case and from asset to asset. On the flip side, we can see that this scale provides us with a very usable scale of differentiating between different probabilities of occurrence of a certain event, assigning impact to each risk. Once we have identified the risk and the likelihood of the risk, the next step is to quantify the impact that the risk materialization might have on the organization. For example, if there's a public-facing web server that is unpatched and gets breached, what will be the impact on the organization? Different organizations calculate an impact in different ways. Some organizations might use the CVSS scoring to calculate the impact of the risk. Others might use their own rating derived from the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of a certain asset. CIA triad, by the way. And others might base it on the severity categorization of the incidents, similar to likelihood. We also quantify impact, often on a scale of 1 to 5. An example scale of the impact can be based on the following definitions. Number 1, informational. Very low impact, almost non-existent. Low, impacting a limited number or limited part of the area of the organization's operations with little to no revenue loss. Medium, impacting one part of the organization's operations completely with major revenue loss. High, impacting several parts of the organization's operations, causing significant revenue loss. 5, critical, posing an existential threat to the organization. And this is a little drop down here. Okay. Risk ownership. The last step to performing the risk assessment is to decide what to do with the risks that were found. We can start by performing some calculations on the risk itself. The simplest calculation takes the likelihood of the risk and multiplies it with the impact of the risk to get a score. Some risk registers make use of more advanced rating systems such as DREAD. Assigning scores to the risk helps organizations prioritize which risk should be remediated first. While you may think the simplest answer is to secure the system so there is no risk, in real life that it isn't that simple. Absolutely correct. Um, Implementing more security costs more money, and it doesn't help if we spend more money on security than what we risk losing if we leave the risk open. Right. In the last step, we decide who owns the risk that were identified. These team members are then responsible for performing an additional investigation into what the cost would be to close the risk versus what we could lose if the risk is realized. In cases where the cost of security is lower, we can mitigate the risk with more security controls. However, where it uh, where it is higher, we can accept the risk. Accepted risk should always be documented and reviewed periodically to ensure that the cost has not changed. And here's an example here: risk owner McSkitty. Internal and third-party risk assessments. Risk assessments are not just done internally in an organization, but can also be used to assess the risk that a third party may hold to our organization. Today is a very it is a very common it is very common to make use of third parties to outsource key functions of your business. For example, a small organization may outsource its financial division to a large auditing firm, or a large organization may outsource the development of some of its applications to a software engineering firm. However, this changes the risk as a compromise of the third party, where we may not have full control over their security. Could still result in a compromise of our data or sensitive assets. As such, we need to consider the risk the third party poses to us. It says, why do companies do internal risk assessments? Internal risk assessments help companies understand the risk they have within their own walls. It's like taking a good look around your house to check if there are any leaks or broken windows. For example, if a company finds that its software is outdated, it can prioritize updating it to prevent potential attacks. Internal risk assessments help the following: identify weak spots in security, direct resources to the most important areas, stay compliant with security rules and regulations. Why do companies do risk assessments of third parties? Companies don't just assess themselves, they also need to evaluate the risks that come from working with other companies like vendors, suppliers, or partners. This is called third party risk assessment. And it's important because one weak link in the chain can affect everyone. That's absolutely true. Just go and Google some data breaches that have involved third parties that got breached, and then the attacker traversed from the third party's environment into the actual target organization. Let's make it simple. McSkitty and Glitch want to make sure that whichever e-discovery company they choose won't leak or lose sensitive data, so they will be reviewing if these companies have good security measures to keep data safe, follow data protection rules, align with the security standards that McSkitty and Glitch have in place. By doing a third-party risk assessment, McSkitty and Glitch are reducing potential supply chain risk, as I just stated, making sure the investigation doesn't run into trouble because of a weak security link in the chain. In order to do this, McSkitty has to create a risk assessment that can be sent to potential third parties. Right. I've also seen this in the form of like questionnaires and stuff like that. Based on the answers provided by the third parties, McSkitty can then make an informed decision on which third party would be best. Maybe that's what they're talking about here, like sending them like a type of security risk assessment, like security risk questionnaire or something like that, right? That's pretty common these days, and you can create one yourself at your own organization, or you can find one online somewhere, like examples, what have you. Procuring a partner. Let's put this knowledge to the test. Let's start the static site attached to this task by pressing the View Site button. You'll have to assess the level of risk that each of these vendors pose. We send a questionnaire to each potential third party and have received their answers. Using these answers, you will have to add new risk to the risk register, which will give an overall risk score for each third party. Once done, we can choose the third party that has the lowest risk score. So go ahead, try to answer these questions yourself, come back to the video, and we will step through it, of course. All right, let's take a look here. What does GRC stand for? As we read earlier, it says governance, risk, and compliance. Now we got to get this flag, so we have to go through this area here, and it's probably going to take a lot of trial and error. But let's get started. Instructions. You'll be assessing 3 vendors based on their responses to security questions. For each vendor, review the vendor's response to each security question. Identify potential risk based on their response and add them to the risk register. For each risk, provide a clear description of the risk. Rate the impact 1 to 4, where 4 is the highest. Rate the likelihood 1 to 4, where 4 is the highest. The risk score is automatically calculated by multiplying impact times likelihood. The vendor risk score is the sum of all risk scores for that vendor. Your goal is to identify the vendor with the lowest total risk score. Got it. All right, so let's go ahead and go through this and see what we can find out. Risk register, document identified security risk for Crimson Lion. Interesting name. All right, let's take a look at question number 1. Data in transit and data at rest needs to be encrypted with AES encryption as a requirement for this project. What type of AES encryption does your company use for data in transit and data at rest? It says AES 256 for data in transit and none at data at rest. Okay. And let's see here. I'm going to say to be let's see, medium risk. Well, they do have it encrypted in transit, but not at rest. So yeah, let's see. I'm gonna say high, and then likelihood. I would say possible, and let's see what they give us here. Okay, perfect assessment, good. Let's see, question number 2. What kind of access controls do you have to ensure data is accessed only by authorized people? The response, data can be accessed by all the people on the relevant team and the global administrators. All right, I would say risk appears to be, I guess, low. I mean, they have it locked down to the relevant team and global administrators. So maybe that's it. I'd say possible. That needs work. Okay, so well, let's go back and see. After some trial and error, this is what we got for this one here. It's critical for the impact, and then likelihood level is likely. I'm assuming due to too many people having access to this data, that the likelihood would be set to likely, and then impact level would be critical because of the nature of the data from, I guess, question number 1. All right, so let's go ahead and add that in here. And let's see. I would say, well, I got to change this information, I guess. There, I would say high. Okay, at risk. Question number 3. How long do you keep client data after the case is closed? 2 weeks to 1 month. I mean, I don't think that would be high, so I would say medium and unlikely. So let's see, risk appears to be medium. All right, let's see if they like that answer or not. And it needs to be reviewed again. For question number 3, this is what we have. Risk appears to be high, impact critical, likelihood likely. And I assume due to, of course, nature of the data, and that they said that they keep the client data from 2 weeks to a month. I guess that is too long to keep that information. I guess it needs to be in a shorter period of time when they need to remove that information. I'm assuming maybe the vendor needs to get rid of that information after they close the case. That's what I'm assuming. But that should be what we're looking for here. And you can see their perfect assessment. Okay. So let's go ahead and complete this one. Then vendor number 2, Azure Cobra. And take a look at question number 1. It's the same thing. AES requirement. What type of AES does your company use for data in transit and data at rest? It says AES for data in transit and none at rest. I believe this was the same as the last one. So risk appears to be high, impact level high. possible for likelihood. Okay, add the risk. Question number 2. And let's take a look here. The response to this question was data can be accessed by all people in the organization. Now this one's a no-brainer, okay? That the risk appears to be critical, okay? Critical and likelihood is going to be very likely. So that's that one. And then question number 3, let's take a look here. And I think this was the same as the other one as well, 2 weeks to a month. So that's going to be critical for impact, and likelihood is going to be likely. All right. And that's it for that particular org. Last one here is Emerald Serpent. So let's take a look, see what they have. Data in transit, none at data for rest. I keep forgetting this one. I don't know if it was possible. Let's see here. Okay. I think it was that one. Yeah, okay. That was like the same answer as the other one, I believe. So take a look at question number 2. What kind of access controls do you have to ensure data is only accessed by authorized people? Data can be accessed only on a need-to-know basis. Okay, so that sounds like low and unlikely, so the risk appears to be low. All right. And apparently that's not what they're looking for here. Okay, critical. All right. Okay, so going back to, I guess, what the data is, it would be considered to be critical if someone got access to that. But all right. Question number 3, how long do you keep? It's the same thing, 2 weeks to a month. So that was, I believe, it was critical and likely. So let's see here. To be high. Let's take a look. Got it. All right, so looks like we're done with all 3 of them. Complete assessment. And you can go through and review these scores. Now, obviously, it may not be something like this. You may have to have additional follow-up questions to the vendor because we don't know their internal environment. We don't have visibility into their scores could adjust based on additional follow-up questions and responses from the vendor. Maybe they have some sort of compensating controls in place to make the score improve. But anyway, so let's go ahead and take a look. Let's see who has the best score. Gosh, we're supposed to look at the lowest one. There we go. All right, that was my bad. But there we go. So Emerald Serpent's what we're looking for here. Got it. Submit, and we are done. If you enjoy this task, feel free to check out the risk management room. So check that out if you're interested in learning more about this process. I'm not a GRC guy, as you can see. It took me multiple tries, trial and error, but hey, that's just part of the game, right? That's just IT and cybersecurity in general. But anyway, as I said throughout this entire room, that this will differ based on organization, depending on your industry, different regulations, laws, and stuff you have to abide by, right? So anyway, if you enjoyed this video, found it educational, be sure to hit that like button. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know every time I post something new or upload a new video. Share the video. Hopefully you're joining me on this journey throughout this year's Advent of Cyber 2024 event. As always, thank you all for taking time to watch my video. Have a nice day, and I will see you in the next one.